My name is Dennis. I work at Kline Creek Farm, which Kline Creek Farm is another of the educational centers owned and operated by the Forest Preserve District. Ours is a little different than the others. I am not a naturalist, I am a heritage interpreter. I focus a little bit more on history. Kline Creek Farm is a working farm. We do all the same jobs that other farmers do, but what we call ourselves an 1890s living history farm. So what that means is that we're raising animals and we're growing crops just like other farmers, but we use the tools and the techniques and the equipment that farmers would have been using in DuPage County about 130 years ago. Right? So this is lambing season for us. There are a bunch of lambs being born now. It's a really exciting time to come out and check out the farm. I want to jump right in, however, to what we're doing. For the next about 20 minutes or so, we're all going to be busy as bees. We're going to be learning about the honeybee. All right? Now, when I say honeybee, what's the first thing you think of? Everybody put a picture in your mind of the first thing you think of. All right? Now, when I said honeybee, by a show of hands, how many of you, the first thing you thought of was something scary? A few of you, all right? By, again, a show of hands, how many of adults too, by the way? How many of you, the first thing you thought of was something positive? Yeah, okay. So, a lot of people, first of all, what are some of the things you were thinking of? What do you think of when you think of honeybees? Honey, good. Pollinators, pollinating, good. Some of you thought of things that were kind of scary. What do you think of? Bee stings, all right? So there are all kinds of things that some people think about when they think about pollinators. Nobody here mentioned allergies. Is anybody allergic to bees? A couple of people? Okay, so a lot of people, oops, there we go. A lot of people are afraid of bees. And my hope for all of you before you leave today is that you won't be afraid of bees anymore. Right? That's my goal for today. There are a lot of reasons why we are afraid of bees. They're perfectly good reasons. Those of you who raised your hands when I asked if you were allergic, that's a really good reason. Right? Even if you're not allergic, even if you've never been stung, we all know that getting stung by a bee hurts. Nobody likes getting hurt. Right? That's a pretty good reason to be a little bit afraid of bees. The noise that they make, that buzzing noise that they make, for some people that's a trigger. They don't like that sound. It makes them afraid. The color, right? A lot of insects use color to hide as a camouflage. The bees do the exact opposite. They're visible almost everywhere they go, those yellow and black stripes. That is nature's warning sign. It means stay away. All right? And we've learned that lesson so well, it's so far back in our brains that we use that now as a warning sign for all kinds of things. Yellow and black stripes means caution. All right? So, it is important to use caution around bees. We should respect bees. But you don't have to be afraid of bees. Most people who are afraid of bees are afraid of getting stung. And most people who've been stung were not stung by a bee. They were stung by a yellow jacket, which is a kind of a wasp, right? Now they kind of look the same. In what ways do they look the same? They both have wings. They're both yellow and black. They both have 6 legs.
They both have 2 sets of wings.
Exactly. All that stuff.
They both have the same body structure.
Exactly. All of that stuff that Dave had you singing about. They're insects. They all have the same kind of body type. They're yellow and black, and they have stripes. So at a quick glance, they look the same. But as you look more closely, they're actually pretty different. All right? The one on the left has a fat body, wide legs, and it's a little hard to see in this light, but she's all covered in bristly hair. The one on the right has a long body, slender, especially at the waist. She has a sleek body, meaning she doesn't have all that hair, and her legs are long and thin. Right? And which one is the honeybee? Left or right? Left. The hairy one on the left is the honeybee. Most people who've had a bad encounter have had a bad encounter with the thing on the right. The yellow jacket, the reason yellow jackets are a problem sometimes for us is because what they're attracted to for food is our food. So when you're on a picnic or you're carrying snacks or drinks in a bag, that's what attracts yellow jackets. And now you are competing with them for your food. And when they compete for food, sometimes they can get a little aggressive. Their stinger is also the one here on the right. It's shaped like a needle. What that means is that they can attack you again and again and again and again and again. All right? The yellow jacket is the one that is the most problem for us. The honeybee is completely different. First of all, their food, where do they get their food? From flowers. They make it themselves by going to flowers. They're not interested in our food, so we don't interact with them that way. We're not competing for food. That's the first thing. When we do see honeybees, it's usually because they've mistaken us for flowers. Right? We wear bright colored patterned things, especially blues and yellows are attractive to bees. More importantly, we a lot of times smell like flowers. The shampoo that you use, the soap that you use, the perfume that you wear, it makes you smell like a flower. Now, it doesn't take the honeybee long to figure out that you're not one, and she can't get any nectar out of you, and so she goes away. And as long as you don't swat at her or go all crazy on her, she's not going to sting you. Because if you look at her stinger, you see how it's all jagged? When she sticks that stinger in you, when she tries to fly away, it pulls the stinger out, which kills her. It's the last thing she ever does. If it's the last thing you're ever going to do, you don't do it unless you have to, right? Bees are very unlikely to sting. They are not aggressive. Now, some of you are thinking to yourself, I don't care. Honeybees sting. Yellow jackets sting. I'm not going to take the time to look to see which one it is. I just don't want them around. But what we're talking about today are pollinators, and pollinators are really important to our environment, and honeybees are super pollinators. They're important to us in special ways because they help us with our food, and they have for thousands of years. What you're looking at are pictures that ancient Egyptians made of people working with bees and collecting, collecting honey, right? Thousands of years ago, what farming is all about is looking at what nature provides you for food and figuring out how to get it to do more or be more reliable. You can go off hunting for honey once you figure out that honey is good food, but the easier thing is to keep bees. And so all the way back in ancient Egypt, they were keeping bees. As you're keeping bees, you're going to learn something else from watching what happens. You're going to learn that your fruit suddenly is growing better and bigger. Everything is growing better because of the pollination. So now they're helping you two ways. All right? Jumping forward in history, just almost exactly 400 years ago, the first English colonists came to North America in a place called Jamestown, Virginia, 1607. One of the first things they did to make sure they would have enough food was they planted apple trees, lots and lots of apple trees. And guess what? Those apple trees, they didn't do very well. They weren't making good apples. So the colonists were trying to figure out what was wrong, and they figured it out pretty quickly. There were no honeybees. The honeybee isn't native to North America. It's from Europe. And so they had to import them. In 1622, like I say, almost exactly 400 years ago, in 1622, the first honeybees get shipped to North America. And since then, they've been spreading across the country to the point where now pollination is actually one of the really important things for our food supply. What you're looking at here is a picture of almond trees in blossom. The hives that you see in there they don't belong to the person who's growing the almond trees. A beekeeper who has tens of thousands of hives containing hundreds of millions of bees trucked his bees all the way to California in order to pollinate those trees. After a couple of weeks, he packs those hives up onto the trucks. He takes them all the way to somewhere else where maybe he's going to pollinate apples. And then he packs them up, and he takes them off to pollinate peaches. And then he takes them off to pollinate cranberries. All right? They are really important to everybody's food supply. Guess what? They're also really important to you personally. Because what you're looking at now is a list of just some of the foods that honeybees are responsible for pollinating for us. This is just a part of the list. All right? As you're looking at this, one of the things I hope you're noticing is that some of your favorite foods are on this list. So, am I saying that if we didn't have honeybees, we would all starve to death? No. Well, no. The short answer is actually no. Because what you're not seeing on this list are things like corn and rice and wheat and potatoes and tomatoes and most kinds of beans. All right? Those things aren't pollinated primarily by honeybees. They have different ways of getting their pollination done. So we could survive on a diet of rice and beans. But I don't know about you, but that sounds kind of boring, right? I like apples. I like cucumbers. I like strawberries. And that's what honeybees help us to provide. Okay, now, am I saying that without honeybees we wouldn't have apples? Also no, probably not. The apples would survive, but what's going to happen is you're not going to see them very often. Because right now your apples are being grown by a farmer who lives thousands of miles away. He has hundreds and hundreds of trees. He has a beekeeper truck bees in to pollinate them. In order for him to keep his business going, he needs to produce lots and lots and lots and lots of really great apples. Without the honeybee, his production is going to go down, and pretty soon he's not going to be able to afford it. The apple tree won't die out, but in order to get apples, you're going to have to grow them yourself, instead of being able to go to the store pretty much whenever you want. Okay, so what's the secret to honeybees and why they're such great pollinators? The answer is lots and lots of bees, okay? In this hive, there's no bees here right now, but if this was an active hive, there would be over 40,000 bees in this hive. Almost all of them girls, by the way. In a hive of 40,000 bees, I would expect there to be about 400 boys. They're called drones. There's one queen, and all the rest are worker bees, which are girls. And they do everything for the hive to maintain the hive. They clean it. They protect it. They look after all of the little bees. They make sure that the hive has everything they need, especially food. So it's the worker bees, the girls, who leave the hive to go get food. When they're doing that, let me show you what happens. All right. I need a bee. Come on up. All right. So what's your name?
Lila.
Lila is our bee. All right. So buzz, buzz, buzz. I need you to buzz. Okay. She's buzzing around from flower to flower. Her wings are beating really fast. As her wings are moving that fast, she's creating static electricity. All right? Bees make static electricity on their bodies by beating their wings so fast. Have you ever rubbed a balloon on your head?
Yeah.
Do you mind if I rub a balloon on your head? All right. So I'm rubbing the balloon on her head and I'm creating static electricity. And she's got her hair kind of tied up, but look what happens to her hair. All right? She's got that electric charge in her hair. She's a bee. She lands on a flower. Remember, bees are all covered in hair. Bees are all covered in hair. It's all staticky now. She lands in a pile of pollen. What's going to happen to that pollen? Wait, let me see if I can do this. So your hair's too tied up. It's going to stick. The pollen, here, it'll work for me probably. See, it sticks. All right? So you can go ahead and sit down. Thank you. She's after pollen. When a honeybee is out getting food, they're either looking for pollen or they're looking for nectar. They don't do both at the same time. So when they are out looking for pollen, they pack it on their legs. You see that little bundle right there? That's pollen. So they gather up the pollen, they stick it together, and they stick it on their leg. That's how they carry it back. All right? If they're after nectar, Dave mentioned the proboscis. All right? They use a proboscis in their mouth. It's like sucking from a can through a straw. Right? Only she's not drinking. She's storing it. She's bringing it into her body, but she's just going to carry it. When they've got everything they want on that particular trip, they fly back to the hive. If they brought nectar, or if they brought pollen, they scrape it off. They shove it into the cells in the honeycomb. If they brought nectar, they spit it up. Right? Honey is made from bee spit. All right? It can only be made from bee spit. Only honeybees can do it. It's the enzymes in their body mixing with that nectar. Hummingbirds drink nectar. Butterflies drink nectar. What do honeybees eat? They eat pollen and honey, which is not nectar. All right? It has to turn into honey. So the enzymes from their body, and a little bit of time, it gets thick and sticky, and now you've got honey. It's a unique thing that only honeybees can do. I'm going to get to questions in a second, okay? So, getting back to the hive. The hive, when it's all assembled, it looks a little bit like a high-rise apartment building in Chicago. Right? It's got all these different levels, and each level is a box, a hollow box. And inside each of the boxes are a whole bunch of these things. They're frames. And the honeybees build their honeycomb on this, and that's what they're putting their food into. It's also what the queen is laying eggs into. All right? So we need to keep those things separate. The bottom boxes are called brood chambers. Brood means babies. And if I'm selling you my honey and you find like broken up little pieces of bees and eggs in your honey, you're going to be grossed out and you're not going to buy my honey anymore. So this is the bees' food down on the bottom. And it's also where they lay the queen lays up to 1,000 eggs a day. In order to keep her down there, we're going to use this thing. It's called a queen excluder. The queen is bigger than the worker bees. She can't fit through those little gaps. So we stick this thing on top, and now she's stuck in the bottom. And she can continue laying 1,000 eggs a day, and it's no problem at all. And then we are going to take more boxes and put them on top. You remember how I said that that farming is all about figuring out how nature makes food and how we can get it to do more? This is how we get bees to do more. They fill their food down here, and we don't touch that. But when we start putting empty boxes up here, the workers can still get up there. And they get up into an empty space and they think, I need to make more food. And they keep going. And they fill these supers. It's called a super because super means above or on top. And they fill up these supers full of honey, and that's what we can sell. But more importantly, it means that they're still going out and out and out and out and pollinating more flowers. All right? Now, fun fact. A single bee can visit, every time she leaves the hive, between 50 and 100 blossoms. One trip. She will leave the hive 12 times or more every day. So let's make the math simple. She goes out 10 times and visits 100 flowers. That's 1,000 stops on a blossom. One bee in one day. There are 40,000 bees in a hive, maybe more. Let's say 13,000 of them go out looking for honey. are looking for nectar and pollen. 13,000 bees making 1,000 stops on flowers. 13 million times they stop on a flower in one day. This is why they're such extraordinary pollinators. It's that number of times that they're going out again and again and again. Okay, now, why this picture? You may have heard that honeybees are in trouble. We've been talking a little bit about what if there were no bees? And you're probably wondering, well, why am I talking about what if there are no bees? Have any of you guys ever heard somebody say the words colony collapse disorder? All right, it's a really scary sounding set of words. What it means is that a few years ago, beekeepers started warning us. They were opening their hives and they were finding plenty of food in the hive, but almost no bees. There was a queen and just a handful of other bees, and almost all the worker bees were gone. All right, what that means, that was a real wake-up call because they're important to our food supply. And it raised a bunch of questions also about our environment. So we've been talking about what can you do to help these insects and these birds. In the case of the honeybee, there are a lot of things that you can do. And they're really, most of them, pretty easy. And the beautiful thing about helping the honeybee is that you're also helping the butterflies and the hummingbirds and the other things. All right, so what are some of those things? First, talk to your family first, because it's always easy to talk to your family. If you get the guts up to go talk to your neighbors, talk to them too. Try to get them to use less chemicals, especially outside of their house. There are a lot of reasons we do this. So let's say you're growing tomatoes, and you worked really hard to grow these really big, beautiful tomatoes, and you go out one morning and they're all covered in slugs, and the slugs are eating your tomatoes. Well, what a lot of people do is they put something on the tomatoes to kill the slugs. Or let's say your grandma grows prize-winning roses, and she goes out someday and she finds a bunch of aphids crawling around on her roses, and they're eating the roses, destroying her roses. It's pretty easy to spray something to kill those aphids. The problem is it doesn't just kill the aphids. Insecticides kill all insects. All right? And so anything that you put out that's going to kill insects is going to kill bees. Another chemical that we use a lot of. We don't like clover and dandelions growing in our yard. A lot of people like a yard that looks like this. In order to get a yard that looks like this, we spread chemicals that kill dandelions and clover. Well, guess what are the two first things that bloom all across the suburbs? Dandelions and clover. And when the bees come out of their hives, they are desperate to make more honey. They are almost out of honey from the year before. They need to start making honey right now. And if the dandelions and clover are all gone, this yard, do you see any flowers in this yard? No. If this yard looks like this, and their neighbor's yard looks like this, and the neighbor over here's yard looks like this, bees don't see a lush green yard. They see a desert, right? There is no food for them, and they can only fly about 2 miles. So if you have an area where there's no flowers, there's also no bees. All right, so you can protect them and help them by not putting chemicals out. Another thing you can do that's maybe more fun, we talked about this already a little bit, you can make pollinator-friendly spots. As a service project, you could make a pollinator-friendly garden in your yard, or maybe in a neighbor's yard. That would be a fun thing to do. You could talk to a local business in the downtown area where you live, or maybe a local park, and see if you could plant a bee-friendly garden. There are all kinds of things that you can plant, all right? Hummingbirds, she mentioned, they like long tube-shaped flowers that are red. Bees like the exact opposite. They like blue and yellow flowers, and they like them to be open and flat. They don't like crawling into things, okay? So the anise hyssop is a tall thing. The flowers are wide open for them to get at. Bee balm, you might guess just by the name that bees like that one. Crocus, blue, yellow, open, perfect, all right? There are trees that you can plant if you have time and money. Apple trees are great because it feeds the bees and then they feed you, The linden tree, it's a little hard to see, but right here, that's a bee. They love those. And the poplar tree. Okay, so there are things that you can actively do. Another thing that you can do, education is a really important tool in our toolbox. And you guys, the Girl Scouts, are really good about education. That's why you guys are here today, was to learn. The thing about education, there are two things that are best about education. We already sort of talked about it a little bit. We've given you a ton of information today. We want you to go home and use it. All right? It does no good if you learn about something and then don't do anything. So we want you to go home and use it. But the other thing you can do is share it. Let other people know what you know. I talked at the very beginning about how so many people are afraid of bees, and I was hoping that by the end you guys wouldn't be, because they're not a threat to you. Still, a lot of people out there are afraid of honeybees, and now you can go and tell them, don't be afraid of honeybees. They're not going to sting you most of the time, as long as you're not hurting them. And if you see somebody freaking out over something like this, which is a swarm of honeybees, and you can imagine why, if you saw somebody who had one of these things hanging in their trees, they might think, I need to kill those, or somebody's going to get hurt. But the truth is, and this is what education is all about, what these honeybees are doing is looking for a new home. What they're clustered around, the reason they're in this big tight bundle, is because inside there is the queen. She left the hive. And when she left the hive, the worker bees followed her to protect her. She can't be exposed and out in the open. If she dies, the hive dies. So they go with her and they surround her. They're not going to attack you because they can't leave the queen. They're actually completely harmless in this. And as soon as they find a new home, which doesn't take very long, they will be gone if you just leave them alone. All right? So, again, a lot of information. Sometimes it's hard to know, especially with some of these things, does it really matter if I plant a little garden? I want to leave you with one thing, which is something you guys know really well. The Girl Scout law is all about little steps, things that you do to make yourself better, and by making yourself better, you make other people better, and by making other people better, you can make the world better. It's the same idea. Little steps. Everything positive is a step in the right direction. All right? And you guys coming here today was one of those first steps in the right direction. So we want to say thank you very much for coming out today. We're going to be at our different tables if you want to keep asking us questions. And for right now, yes, I will start answering some questions right here.
There's a stink bug right there.
I am sure there is. The stink bugs come inside in order to stay warm. And this room they love this room because of all these windows. Yes? Yes? If you were to go by them and start swinging a tennis racket at them, yes, they would probably attack you then. If you're just standing next to them, probably not. I should give you one little other, this is just a little hint, okay? Where's my friend who had the bee jacket and the bee hood? What color is it? White. Bees are a little bit afraid of things that are black. Black things make them think of two things that hurt them: skunks and bears. And so it's a really good idea if you're wearing black to maybe not go too near bees because that can be something that can make them a little nervous. White is fine. Colors are fine most of the time. Yes? It's okay. It's those darker colors, a lighter color brown like what I'm wearing, a tan, would be okay. A dark brown, it might be. I mean, they're not going to, if they see black, they don't just go crazy. But it's better to be wearing bright colors than dark colors around bees.
But they have black on
They do. They have black and yellow on themselves, but they can recognize each other mostly through kind of smell. Go ahead, you have a fact.
When the bees fight, that means they lose their stingers.
Exactly. When a honeybee stings, I should say when a honeybee stings an animal. So if they sting you, or if they sting your dog, or something like that, they lose their stinger. If they sting each other, weirdly enough, they don't. Their bodies don't catch the stinger the same way that our bodies do. One more. How long does it take them to build up a hive? So that swarm that you saw there, what they're looking for usually is like a hollow log or a hollow tree, something with narrow spaces in it. As soon as they find one, they just move right in. It can take them, it'll probably take them a couple of months to fill it full of food, but in the meantime, they'll continue living in it. So basically, as soon as they find a spot, they've got a new home. Sure, come on up. Okay, I'm going to stop.
Awesome. So I first want to thank you all for coming out.